Yowie Flash Wolves are still in the tournament and going to fight TSM later on in the day in the semifinal. You talked a lot about the Aurelia, and Stake ended up on the Maokai, and it paid them dividends.
Yeah, I was really hoping that SK would be banning the Maokai. As I mentioned before, this champion will make an underperforming top laner look very good, and he did that. He played really well because, as you saw in one of the team fights, LeBlanc W's in to try to harass. Maokai, all he does, points and clicks on the LeBlanc, and now all of a sudden, when LeBlanc distortions back, you got a Maokai in the middle of the team, CCing everybody. You don't want this, especially if you want to go with the first pick LeBlanc. Disappointed in the draft, particularly the Nidalee ban as well.
Yeah, that was a really interesting one, especially because the Rengar, Svenskeren really didn't make any use of the ult whatsoever. We did see a lot of issues with his ferocity stacks coming in, which will come into play in the replay we've got for you guys in just a few minutes. But yeah, I was really underwhelmed, and we wondered, will SK be able to hit this power spike? And the answer was definitively not. They were repeatedly outsieged due to the double AD composition. SK just didn't have a comp with enough kind of forward wave clear to be able to even get close to those turrets as soon as the Ezreal and Kog'Maw grouped up.
Something I really liked in the early game was the fact that when the lane swap was initiated, we saw SK Freddy really teleport to the bottom lane, as he always does, and try to get that wave bottom. And they kind of try to dive him, almost zoned him off, take the early tower, but instead of recalling and establishing the lanes again, they went for a 4-minute and 50-second dragon. And then eventually that snowballed them to be able to get a third dragon by 18 minutes. And when you're running a double AD composition, the buffs that you get from the dragon are incredibly important, just because the AD, just by taking the first dragon, you actually are able to give up to 4 following dragons, just because the only buff that you really need is that AD one. Double AD, you really get a lot of bonus for it. But we saw that at the 24-minute mark, they were contesting the 4th dragon. SK find themselves in a position where they really need to fight that.
And arguably, they should have taken that dragon as well. I think SK did get a bit fortunate that the Flash Wolves weren't able to commit. But just in terms of the Flash Wolves' early game, very well thought out, very well calculated. They went for that faster tower. They came in saying, we need to defend the towers this game. They did so very successfully. Yeah. They were the ones with the early pressure, transitioning from pushing Freddy off the bottom tower to taking the tower to the dragon, then the blue buff on the Maokai, and then just having him wave.
Yeah, so they did take elements from that GE Tigers win. I did want to talk to Freddy about Freddy a little bit more. We talked about his rage management and his play on Gnar, but he didn't itemize in lane for the lane. They were thinking ahead, thinking that with the CS advantages, they could pull it out later, is what I presume.
Yeah, they went, the Flash Wolves were for the early laning itemization with the double D rings, as he mentioned, as well as the blue buff, but SK did not. They went for the Sunfire first into the Maokai, who was itemizing for the lane, and you saw at one point, Freddy forced to use the teleport to defend the tower because he was getting pushed out. He went for the early Giants build, double Dorans, which lends me to think, okay, he's going for the laning phase, but no, eventually he goes for the Sunfire, loses lane, and then is able to eventually bully him out just via being a better player in CS. But then, you can understand the armor itemization against a double AD composition, but I feel like go for a Hex Drinker and just really bully the Maokai out.
Yeah, I think for me, the really big takeaway here as we look forward is the Flash Wolves really did have a very strong early game plan. It looked like they were tailoring their strategy to their opponent, and we saw them just have great objective control throughout most of the early and mid game. The farm is going to be an issue. I mean, we talk about when they go up against TSM. TSM is much better in terms of their objective play. We've seen them drop some dragons early in the LCS, but I feel in this tournament, they've been a lot better with contesting those early dragons. And that farm advantage was keeping SK even in gold because the disparity was so massive. And so I think that probably the Flash Wolves is going to be a pretty big underdog going up against TSM. But who knows, if they have another plan, maybe they can squeak by based off of towers.
And one of the things that was working very well for them, even with the CS disadvantage, was Sword Art and his plays. And we actually have a replay, the one that you called up a little bit before. Let's get that up on the screen, because at this point, I don't even know if it's SK not playing it right or just a fantastic play from Sword Art.
The most important thing about this replay has to be that Sven is starting to ult without full ferocity, so he can't get the instance Nair. And interestingly enough, Rek'Sai, while she's burrowed, has full trace of the Rengar, so they can see the footsteps coming in. You see right there, drop the pink ward, immediately A-walk, and he gets knocked up. There is no CC. He uses the empowered W to kind of stay a little bit tanky, and then right there, when Fox isn't able to follow up properly, has to use his first distortion to get in. Sword Art with the instant ultimate, the instant exhaust in, when she distortions back, as I mentioned before, Maokai W's on the LeBlanc, and you got a Maokai in the middle of your team, and just they can't be any follow-up because they're going in one by one. The exhaust nullifies LeBlanc, Maokai in the middle of your team, and this is not how you want to engage into a double AD composition. You need to flank. You can't go head-on, especially with the Rengar.
Right, and that's just basic Rengar play in the late game. Once you move from that warrior enchant damage spike into the tankiness, you have to be able to get those flanks off, which means your positioning has to change. It was all too easy. And Karsa there too, if you looked at that replay, had a great knock-up because SK was actually clustering right in front of their turret. So he hit like a 3 or 4 man knock-up, and that really allowed them to just continue rolling through that fight. It was a really good team fight from Yowie. Now, they didn't have the best team fights in other parts of the game. It was hit or miss, but that one in particular was very well executed.
Yeah, and Karsa doing very well, and we actually have him standing by with Chobra for a couple of thoughts into that fantastic victory.
Thank you very much, Shocks. And ladies and gentlemen, what a